Good day to you. You know, probably all of us in this class watched Sesame Street when we were younger. Even though you were raised in the social media generation, you probably were exposed to Sesame Street. And one of the most important lessons you learn on Sesame Street, as I recall, is the lesson of sharing. How important it is for young people to learn to share. That if you have a puzzle that you're working on, that if somebody else wants to try that puzzle, that you should let them have a try it. In general, sharing is a human trait that we consider to be a valuable trait that we want us to have. But that's not the way that we're talking about sharing today, right? We're talking about sharing in a completely different way as we take on the first social media platform breaking out of our American social media platforms. We're taking on a Chinese social media platform today. We're taking on Weibo. And the chapter is entitled Power, Ideology, and Social Struggles, as we take on not only learning a new social media platform, but also learning about China and how sharing is a value that's promoted by social media platforms that is not quite what it seems. That's what Christian Fuchs is contending. That's what we're going to cover today as part of our instructor video. I want to let you know that I have been to China. I taught a class in China. I experienced some of the things that Christian Fuchs talks about in this chapter that I'll throw in here. And really what we're doing is we're now critiquing another country's economic system. We're moving away from American capitalism, not entirely, right? Because we're still going to come back and talk about capitalism and social media platforms, but we're talking about a new country so that we can see that these same concepts that we've been applying so far to American social media platforms can also be applied across the world, even when that country is a communist country as China is. So let's get into our subject today, and we want to make some points about Chinese social media platforms first. We want to say that China has some of the most popular social media platforms that are used across the world. There's quite a few of them, and that includes also video sharing platforms as well. It just happens to be that Weibo is the one that we're studying for this class. And China, with so many people in it, 1.4 billion people is the latest estimate, I believe. We have, 350 million in the United States, China with 1.3, 1.4, somewhere around there. That country has the largest online market. The most users of the internet, as far as belonging to a country, are Chinese users. So when we talk about China, we're talking about a market economy. And yes, China, even though it's communist, has capitalism that's part of its economic structure. It's a very particular kind of capitalism that we're going to talk about. It's an emerging form of capitalism, and we'll describe that as we go on. So let's talk about China and the West now, the relationship between China and what we refer to as the West, which would be Europe, and it would be the United States. Not so much Mexico. It's basically the United States and Mexico and Canada. We can say that represents the West, the same way that Russia refers to the West as well. So we know that Chinese people generally are poor. You can look at the statistics for the average income per capita in your chapter. You can see the average per capita income in the United States is in the 60,000s. That's what the average person is making. But in China, it's 20,000. So it's a very, very poor country. And so China is open to becoming richer. We're going to decide what rich means later on in the course, but at least as far as acquiring material wealth and becoming an economic powerhouse. In fact, in 2014, China dislodged the United States as the biggest economy in the world for a brief time period, a couple years, and then the United States came back and took that #1 position in terms of money taken in and money spent. So China is achieving this because it is embracing capitalism. It's embracing a certain kind of capitalism. It's not embracing it wholeheartedly, nor is it rejecting it. And it's the same with its relationship with the West, and we can even see that playing out in the negotiations and conversations that are taking on between the U.S. and Russia with China involved. China's always sort of in the middle. It's never completely with you, never completely against you. That's in China's approach, and that's the case also with social media in the context of its relationship with the West. So now let's talk about Weibo. Let's talk about Weibo. We're going to describe its political economy like we've done for other political economies in this class. First of all, it is owned by a parent company named Sina, S-I-N-A. That is the company. It's operating according to losses and profits, but Weibo has not been a moneymaker in the history of the country history of the company overall. It has been in recent years. It's gone through the crisis of recessions that capitalism has, and it has been very much like Twitter. In fact, Fuchs in this chapter compares Twitter and Weibo very much. They're both microblogs. Weibo, like Twitter, uses targeted advertising. That's how it makes its money. It goes after people. Like Twitter, it uses free labor. It uses people typing stuff on it all day long to create the content that is then sold, or sold as access to the people creating the content. The board members of Weibo are, like Twitter, also financial investors that, just like Weibo, they hold positions in other companies. They're not poor people. That's the point here. They are already well-established and wealthy people who are running the boards of Twitter and Weibo. We're sneaking Twitter more and more in here now. And then we have the privacy policy. We haven't really studied privacy policies yet. We're going to start to highlight those more as a way of continuing capitalism, of continuing capital accumulation. You can read the privacy policies in the book. They are all about sharing, about openness. That's what the privacy policies are about, and about helping to serve the needs of people who are on Twitter and who are on Weibo and Facebook and all the rest of them, helping to serve them better with advertising that meets their needs. That is on the outside what privacy policies are. Nowhere do the privacy policies mention anything about gathering data, gathering big data from the people using them. That's not, nowhere do the privacy policies say anything about the use of digital labor to create the content. There's nothing about commodification through what you're typing when you're on Twitter. None of that is mentioned. And so Fuchs is saying it's a big smokescreen, right? It's hiding behind the ideology of sharing to gather more data. Sure, you want to feel safe. You want to feel like you're getting on a social media platform where whatever you type, you have control over, and you don't want it to be seen by anybody else, that you don't have control over them seeing it. And that's the way that you approach privacy policies. But what they are really doing is gathering even more information and even more engagement on your part to get you involved with producing even more content for the companies in question to make money off of. And so that takes us now to the ideology of engaging, of connecting, of sharing. These are all the code words that we use to describe social media, that the Sesame Street values. Sharing is a really important thing, right? Well, according to Fuchs, this is capitalist ideology, because sharing is used to justify the capitalism. Sharing is used to justify making all that money off of you, and you're working for free. None of that is talked about when sharing is discussed. Sharing in and of itself is not a bad idea, but the problem is when it occurs within a class-divided society, sharing is not equal. We can take B.J. Mendelssohn's book, Social Media is Bullshit. That book makes the case that the average person believes that they can make it big on social media, that they can get on, they can be an influencer, they can be a content creator, they can get sponsorships. And actually, they can, technically, but it's nowhere near as fair as you think because of our class society. In essence, B.J. Mendelssohn says you've got to have a big budget and you've got to be in the game for a long time with professionals to be able to make it big on social media, unless you are a really, really unusual person. And so no, there's not an equal chance to make your own living on social media like you would be led to believe, and therefore sharing is not equal. Similarly, the whole concept of freedom, what we talk about all the time in our country, we talk about freedom. The whole concept of freedom is defined on social media basically as the enablement of users to communicate, consume, and create. Those three things: communicate, consume, and create. That's how we define freedom. We don't define freedom in other ways, like freedom from corporate interests, or freedom from personal struggles, or freedom from surveillance, or freedom from bad eating habits. That's not how we're defining it. We're defining it in a commodified way. That's how we define freedom, the freedom to purchase what we want, right? And in fact, Fuchs makes a statement that the internet is the biggest narcissistic presentation machine ever invented. It's the biggest narcissistic presentation machine ever presented because we see our freedom as the ability to go on the internet and tell others about our good fortunes, to tell others about our good looks, to tell others about the amazing places that we've traveled and the amazing things that we've eaten. So the internet is basically a place for people, in the name of the feeling of freedom, to produce more content that is about themselves, which is them being sold and sold back to you as a targeted advertised person. Now, this is where I want to introduce that I have a chapter that I've written that's published that we're going to be reading before too long. It fits right into this. It's all about focusing the self on social media and how easy that is to do today and how enticing it is. I just want to preview it for you right here because we'll be getting to it later. But Fuchs provides an introduction for that way of criticizing social media is by looking at the narcissistic side of human beings. Now let's go on to China's internet political control. And I just want to tell you the Chinese control of media in general is sweeping. There was no Facebook when I was there. Anytime I tried to look at Facebook, website not available. And so it's censored. They even have a ministry of propaganda that's designed to make sure that the right image of China is projected into any media coverage of China. So that means no criticism of government officials, for example. I can tell you one of the funny things, though. You think that China is maybe necessarily a police state because it's so highly surveyed. Yeah, everybody is surveyed who's on the internet, including people trying to get on Facebook. I was listening to E-ah-ooh-ah, E-ah-ooh-ah, E-ah-ooh-ah. That's what it sounded like every single morning when I was in a dormitory in China. And I had to find out what this was, so I went outside and I followed the speakers that were in the ground, you know, loudspeakers or stereo speakers, and I heard this same woman's voice all across the campus I was staying at the University of Shanghai. And I said, I bet I know what this is. This is probably the Chinese military keeping the country at the ready for an invasion. That's probably what it is. But I found out when I went and talked to the front desk people that wasn't what that voice was at all. That was the Chinese exercise lady. And she was telling people to do sit-ups and push-ups in the morning as part of the state's involvement in keeping people healthy. Now, most people don't think of Chinese communism or any kind of communism as that kind of communism. They think of it in other ways. But it's an interesting dimension to their society that shows a care about, I guess, people's exercise and health that is involving the government. The government is regulating that and is taking over at least one distribution channel of media to get that content across. So China has that kind of society. You are monitored very, very closely. And we know that China, though, is not any different even with its monitoring of its own people from the United States when it comes to using social media for surveillance. We can take Edward Snowden. Edward Snowden was a person who blew the whistle on the military, and he blew the whistle on China and the United States. And he showed that the National Security Agency in the United States, which was established after 9/11 for our security, is using social media for surveillance. That social media are tools of a surveyed society. And even though in China you have the Ministry of Public Security as an official agency, you still have the same thing going on in a surveillance-oriented society, which is also surveillance for commodification. But we'll get to that later on in the chapter. Let's talk about China's social credit system. Did you read about this in the chapter? Pretty strange, huh? This is where, in China, a system has been developed to score you according to your reputation. It's a form of social credit system. It's how you interact with people, including on social media, and you receive a score, a government-sanctioned score, on your reputation. How would you like to have a reputation score out there for people to see based on your lying, your accountability, your truthfulness, paying back your debts, eating well, kindness towards others, generosity towards others? This is all tied up in the new kind of China surveillance society. And within the society, the discussion is that capitalism is based on the logic of competition and accumulation. Capitalism is based on that, and that reduces people. Even in China, it reduces people. I want to tell you a quote from page 279. It's pretty powerful. It goes like this: capitalism is based on the logic of competition and accumulation. Companies are enemies on the market. Enemies? Whoa, what does that mean? People looking for jobs are enemies on the job market. People looking for jobs, what does that mean? Nation states competing with each other for power and influence often end up in wars. Yeah, that's true. True. Individualist social media implement the logic of scoring and instrumental reason in everyday life. You're scored on your social media by your algorithms. Nosedive is a theory. It shows that alienating and totalitarian potentials exist out there for instrumental reason. That means to keep us coming back and getting online. That means that China's social system, America's capital system, doesn't matter as long as we keep coming back online. Social media keep us busy with caring about numbers. How many likes have you looked at today? How many shares have you seen? Have you tried to see? How many times have your TikTok videos been viewed? Those numbers mean things to you today, right? Yeah, social media keep us busy with caring about numbers and working on numbers of postings, likes, followers, etc. They are anti-social media because they're in competition. China's social credit system reveals the unsocial character of the application of credit scoring to citizens. You can read about that on your own. It's absolutely fascinating, which takes us to the end of our instructor video for today, which is to talk about China's social struggles. Most of China is working class. Almost everything that you own is probably made in China. What do you think these people are like who are making these clothes that you're wearing and these cell phones that you're having in your pockets and your beauty accessories and all of the goods that you have around your house being made in China? What's life like for them? They're in factories, right? And they're working for salaries that get no more than $20-something thousand a year. We know that from the earlier data. So China is largely a networked working class because they are online as well. And those workers are also online generating content and also working for free. It's a very class-oriented society. And so what does the future hold? How can this kind of situation be equalized? That's really what Fuchs is concerned with, and he's using China as a way to start to introduce some concepts that will be explored later on as we go forward in the class, including the digital worker cooperative. The digital worker cooperative, or the digital worker, that's you, by the way, in case you don't know by now, is creating content that you are also sharing in the profits for. We can say that TikTok does this in a way, right? It offers content creation. If you have enough followers and enough video views, you can make money on TikTok. It's pennies on the dollar, but that's kind of what we're talking about here. We'll explore that more later. And also, to harken back to a previous chapter, working class public spheres. Public spheres not just for the rich and the powerful and the people who have access, but public spheres who are for most of us who are workers, because every time you're on the internet, you're a worker for free. So there you have it. China's Weibo, which is opening up a lot of other conversations about social media as it takes place around the world in the context of the capital accumulation model. Have a great day.